Hi, I'm Ryan Ramos, and the claim that I will be refuting is genetically modified salmon is safe for the marketplace when properly regulated. My opponent's secondary claims are genetically engineered salmon was approved by the FDA. Any possible crossbreedings, mutations are strictly prevented by precautions. GM salmon would positively impact the environment. In response to this first secondary claim, genetically engineered salmon was approved by the FDA. The first subclaim, approximately 20 years of research behind FDA approval. I found a counterclaim in the speech's bibliography that the FDA passed it, but there were precautions. David Reed of CNBC, in his article, "Salmon Becomes the World's First Genetically Modified Animal to Enter Food Supply," stated that in 2015, Aqua Bounty salmon was approved in the US by the Food and Drug Administration. It was reported to be the first genetically modified animal to be approved for human consumption. But within weeks, the FDA issued a ban on the import and sale of GM fish until labeling guidelines were established. So although the FDA did pass it, there was some restrictions on it. And on the last subclaim of this secondary claim, all GM foods must be found as safe as original. I found that the IGF-1, the growth hormone that was used in these GMO salmons, had some very harmful symptoms if there was too much in the human body. Joe Leach of dietversusdisease.org stated in his article, "IGF-1 Miracle Hormone or Health Hazard," that the risks included swelling of the extremities, low blood sugar, headaches, joint pain, heart enlargement, increased cancer risk, hormone dysfunction, and acne. In response to the second secondary claim, any possible crossbreeding mutations are strictly prevented by precautions. The first subclaim stated that all modified salmon eggs are female and sterile. From the evidence used in the speech, it gave reference to a different website that was a fact sheet from the FDA, and it showed that it implied only one of the branches were taking this precaution. In the article by the Food and Drug Administration, animals with intentional genomic altercations, Aqua Advantage salmon fact sheet. It stated that the fish to be produced for food in Panama will be all female, reproductively sterile population. And this was only one of two branches. There was one in Canada as well. So it didn't touch bases on the one in Canada, so it wasn't too sure if the one in Canada was taking the same precautions. In response to the third secondary claims, GM salmon would positively impact the environment. The first subclaim states that it conserves wild fish population. But this evidence was given by the manufacturer of the Aqua Advantage salmon. It was given by the source Aqua Bounty in their sustainable article, saying that our Aqua Advantage salmon grows to market size and using 25% less feed than traditional Atlantic salmon on the market today. This makes an already efficient protein producer even better because it requires less wild fish to be converted into salmon feed. This could be potentially biased because it's coming straight from the source, so they're trying to drive more for their product, and they're not going to talk anything bad about their product. And then for the second subclaim of this secondary claim, says it would reduce carbon emissions. And the reasoning on this one wasn't very clear because there was not really a big dispute over the carbon emissions from the salmon in the first place. And also, in order to receive the benefits, it would imply that all regular salmon fishing and fishing in general has to cease before the benefits could be accounted for. And the last subclaim in this secondary claim was it would enable low impact fishing farm. The evidence was also found on the sustainable article by Aqua Bounty, which is the manufacturer. So this leads to potential biases again. In conclusion, I stated that the evidence of all of the secondary claims had some evidence failure because of biases in majorly the third secondary claim. GM salmon would positively impact the environment. There was a reasoning challenge in the last claim as well because of the reasoning behind carbon emissions. And there were some counterclaims in the first secondary example, taking the evidence down a little bit. Thank you.
All right, Ryan, the thing that you did the best in the presentation was keep track of what the arguments were. You labeled the advocates' claims very clearly. Their secondary claims were listed. As you got to each of those points, you reminded us of those points. You actually also pointed out what their minor claims were on each of those points, and you had specific responses on each of those. So it was pretty easy to follow the structure that you're talking about. Now, the arguments themselves aren't always particularly strong. In essence, the first point, it sounds like you've got maybe a good gotcha moment here where there was in fact a problem after the initial approval, but it sounds like the approval had, or the temporary ban or withdrawal had little to do with the safety of the food and everything to do with how it's going to be labeled. So I'm not sure that that gets you very much. I think you were a little bit better off with the response on the second point, where there is a critic who suggests that the hormone that's associated with these products, this fish, does increase a whole variety of potential risks. And you give a long list of potential issues there. How significant that risk is, why the FDA didn't see it, why this person is more insightful than all the researchers and the 20 years of research that's been done on that is not explained, but at least you presented some, where are you? You're back there somewhere. Yeah. At least you provided some information here to suggest that there's a little bit of controversy on that particular point. And so that's exactly the kind of thing that you need to do. It would be nice if there was something that was a little bit more forceful, and in fact, if there was any dissent in the FDA's original decision, I think that probably could have been noted and maybe made that argument a little bit stronger. On the crossbreeding issue, on the second point, You've got an interesting idea here that their evidence really implies that it's only going to be one of the producers that does this, and it's actually produced at 2 farms. It's unclear. I think you're right that it is unclear, that you can't tell what's going on here. But I don't know that that necessarily renders it an ineffective protective tool that they're taking. This is one of those places where I think you need to do a little bit of speculation and a lot more research. And let's face it, this is, anybody who's seen Jurassic Park knows immediately how this doesn't work. The kind of control you're attempting here, it's just not possible. We've got chaos theory that explains that whole thing. Heck, I'd even allow you to quote Ian Malcolm. You guys familiar with the movie Jurassic Park? Okay, so, in essence, this is, all very speculative in the first place, that we're going to work it this way, but the idea that we can control the power of genetics by, limiting who gets to breed, that's potentially problematic. I think the bigger question is, are there other issues that we should be worried about here? Is there any way that these animals can get out into the wild, or is there a possibility of cross-contamination? There's no discussion of that issue. Their only answer is, we're doing this thing where they're all female, and so we're producing it and controlling it that way. They'll automatically be sterile. Yeah, well, we'll see, how that works. The second point, or the third point, is most of your challenges here on the third point are all about potential bias. It's a reasonable point to raise, but I don't think it's a very strong point because mostly it is factual data that we're looking at. How much less food they're going to consume. The carbon impact, I don't know how any of that gets measured one way or the other. I think there's a good press to be made on that particular argument. But most of your argument simply seems to be, well, this is coming from the manufacturer, so of course they're going to say good things about their particular product. The absence of any evidence on the other side, though, is a damning thing on your position, and since you don't have any of that evidence, then we have factual data that's being presented by the manufacturer, no counter evidence on the other side, and maybe there's some bias there, but that's all we've got to give us any hesitation on this particular thing. That seems a little underwhelming. But it's nicely organized, and we appreciate your going first. Thank you.